When you hear a tale of a fateful trip that started from this tropic port.
Anybody from Florida?
It's time for another edition of Right at Home here on 1410 KGRN as we talk real estate and all things related, sometimes not, with local realtor Bon Vivant Man About Town, owner, broker, Remax Partners Realty of Grinnell, Marshalltown, and Brooklyn, Matt Cargelati.
Good morning. Hi, how are you? Yeah, I'm a little lower energy than that.
Yeah. So we're talking sailing today, right?
Sailing? Oh, wholesaling.
Oh, that was on the side of the boat there. SS Minnow, wasn't it?
That's right.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hey, did you hear about that guy who's missing? Surprisingly, was going to jet skiing from Florida to the Bahamas here during the storm,
Ah,
or in the aftermath of the storm. It's 115 miles. What is the range of a jet ski?
you have no idea. I know they make like these really big auxiliary kits for them too, for like people who do offshore fishing with them, and so it's really a really high powered small boat.
Right.
I would imagine that it would. I mean, if someone was skilled enough, they should be able to do that. Sure, it's not the longest drive anybody's ever made on one.
Sure, I just
The open ocean on a jet ski just sounds a little much for me, but
especially in the wake of a hurricane.
well, obviously the Ian hurricane aftermath was pretty incredible for Florida, but watching people actually taking their boats out of dock and going out to sea in the middle of the hurricane, that was fascinating. And it's like, wow, that is like, this has got to be this person's last resort of like, I'm not losing my boat. The only way I'm going to save it is by going out in the water with it. And
kind of makes sense, really, because you see all the damage in the
right.
docks and everything, but they're just slammed around.
Yeah, not even just the docks. I mean, bridges are coming down, and entire islands are being cut in half, and yeah.
Yeah, you have a sister down there, don't you?
Not there. Yeah, my little sister lives in southeast Florida. She's in Key Largo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got her little cameras I can see on my phone,
Oh, nice.
and so yeah, it was just sunshine and lollipops there.
Nice. Well, there you go.
But,
Yeah, unbelievable. That'd be one thing to talk about. I mean, we talked about it after the derecho. How does a disaster like that affects?
well, I mean,
Yeah,
it affects everything.
Yeah.
And
But I'm taking you away from your focus of.
that's all right. I mean, eventually they could tie together, but so now one of the difficulties I would say, especially for those sort of storms, is, well, what does that do? I mean, now what gets built in the place that it once stood, and now that a 10-foot to an 18-foot storm surge for those areas is now going to be the high bar. I don't think you're going to see anything built on the ground. I mean, it's all going to be on stilts. It's like that in the Florida Keys. It's like that in Hawaiian Islands are like that too for different parts of the different islands because of the tsunami. Soon they have to have a minimum tsunami height for new construction and things like that. So I think we're just going to be, yeah, one of those things. You live at sea level, but you got to climb stairs.
Yeah, that's amazing. You sit there and say, and I guess distance and time lends enchantment, but it's like, why would I even want to think about going and living in Florida in the wake of that? Just was like, yeah.
Well, I mean, I know there's some recent Florida.
Of course, I think the same thing every time we have a big snowstorm here now. But what do they do?
And maybe this is the same thing. I mean, we're a hurricane to someone who's dealt with it most of their life maybe isn't that big of a concern until they lose everything. And a snowstorm to me, I mean, I don't really care. I mean, to me, I hate to say it, but I enjoy plowing the snow. So.
Oh, you got a fun little thing to do.
I do, yeah. Yeah, but there could be a lot of real estate wholesaling happening because of this
Yeah.
in Florida too, right? So after the insurance claims are made, after everyone's paid. Some of these homes will be rebuilt, some of them won't. Some of these businesses will be rebuilt, some of them won't. I wouldn't be surprised if we just see, a big chunk of Fort Myers Beach is kind of leveled and essentially either being built up or what's being built on it is kind of like a new and improved. So Fort Myers Beach in 5 years is what I'm interested in seeing at this point, because that's going to be like a new community. And but that real estate wholesaling could be a piece of that. So let's say, for example, right now, if there was like an investor having, taking the opportunity of snatching up some of these properties, post insurance payout, and saying, "Hey, I'll just give you $5,000 for that spot your house used to sit on." Sure. And so someone like that could essentially purchase that or try to put that under contract. And then if they had a portfolio of enough of those purchases, go and try to potentially resell not just the property, but the contract to purchase the property. That's one of the interesting things about real estate wholesaling. And so you don't actually really own anything except the ability to sell it and the ability to buy it. And so it's like if you're going to buy your house, let's say your house that you purchased here, that maybe you didn't actually, buy it. Instead, what you did is you sold your contract to somebody else to buy it. And so, right,
It's a weird concept.
it is. And that's just more about like a contract assignment or something like that, which is, it does happen from time to time. It's pretty unusual. And when it does, it's for different reasons. It's usually for corporate structure or things like that. So, hey, I'm going to buy this house, but it's going to be part of an investment or an investment package that I have. And I think that's fine. We can just use your company name or your name, or we can put two assigns. And so that way you can assign that to a different ownership. Still your ownership, but maybe it's a corporate owner, or maybe it's, your maybe your Roth owns it, or whatever. There's a lot of different things that you can do with that. And so, but a wholesaling is a little bit different. It's like, oh my gosh, I picked this thing up really super cheap, and it's one of those moments where it's like the Peter Griffin getting a mortgage, and the contract just says, "I can't believe he's signing it," right?
Mm-hmm.
And so someone who just wants it to go away, they sign a cash contract for, a period of time, and that's really low, and that savvy wholesaler takes that out and then actually um, um, searches for a buyer for the contract for a higher price, sometimes a much higher price than what they were paying for it. And rather than ever even owning the property, now they don't. Now, in transaction, let's just say the purchase is, maybe they buy it at like $20,000. Maybe they sell it at $90,000. And so, and they actually end up assigning the contract, wholesaling it out to somebody else to buy. And now, by the time it gets to closing, and there's nothing even on record that they owned a house,
Mm.
right?
How would the tax implications of that are interesting?
Well,
I mean,
that's
you
just,
don't actually own an asset. You're not selling an asset, so there's no capital gains, right?
it's complicated. And honestly, I would have to talk to my accountant before I could think about what that looks like. So for me professionally, if I were to do that, since I own a real estate brokerage, I think the argument could be there is that I do this professionally anyway, and I'm still going to end up having to pay taxes, but it would have to be a form of income in through my company. Now, to the general consumer, it could be a different situation. So I'm not going to say one way or the other because I just don't know.
That's not a tax consultant. He doesn't even play one on the radio.
Yeah, I mean, I can actually offer some advice around taxes, but not that. Um,
Yeah, that would be a little hinky, I would think.
well,
you're
yeah,
you're biting your tongue. You want to say something, but you don't.
I don't know. Actually, honestly, I just really don't know. I mean, I think that yes, there's the potential to, you know, to skirt that in a way, but I mean, I don't think it's all that gray. I actually think it's more black and white. I think that, yeah, if it's income, and it goes into your account. And if you get audited, you're gonna have to explain where it came from.
Who
And
found it?
if you can't explain where it came from, then what is it, right?
Hmm.
And so, and why is it tax-free income? Because income's not tax-free, but there are capital gains exemptions in real estate sales. So, is this a real estate sale? No, it's not. It's a contract sale, essentially sold at assignment. But so yeah, a little tricky. Now, some of the things that are really important to be careful of within real estate wholesale to do wholesale is is a little complicated, and it does requires a lot of audacity. But you kind of have to have, you have to be a tough nut. You have to be a hard screw to really do that, right?
Yeah.
It's not something for everybody. But on a rare occasion, um, I mean, you'll see somebody kind of come out and do this in a regular way. This is their profession. They specialize in picking up distressed properties or old property. I mean, and usually within like their materials, it's usually the elderly, and so you do want to make sure it's not somebody that's certainly in a predatory sort of way of like, well, we primarily work with the elderly, and they're gonna just sell us their house for cash, just for what they need to be able to liquidate, to be able to go into assisted living or whatever the case is, and then essentially still lose, right, leaving all that other meat on the bone of really what the rest of their value of their house is. So, I mean, the wholesale thing is is essentially an oversight, and so somebody along the way has made a mistake in letting this property being sold for this low amount. And that wholesaler is either potentially causing that mistake, or they're definitely facilitating it, and they're certainly seizing the opportunity to profit from it, right? So I still think it's a really good idea to try to have as much representation a buyer can through that situation. Super important. The devil's in the details. You really want to make sure you examine that contract very well. If you've got a real estate agent or brokerage that can be involved to kind of help, not so much as sanitize that, but to kind of give it a quality control check, just to make sure things are being done right. I mean, all the better. And at the very, very least and you absolutely, everyone should do this, especially any wholesale opportunity, get some legal advice. Talk to an attorney who regularly works in real estate to be able to give you some really good contract and legal advice about the impact of that sale or purchase. So, I mean, there's a little buyer beware on that. Liz Pendens, um, so yeah, no, it's that could be a little tricky, and on a rare occasion, you'll see something like a large commercial portfolio that's been for sale that maybe has been struggling, or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe it's a trailer park or whatever, and that rather than just trying to get that highest and best that they can for it, they may come out and say, you know what, just go try to wholesale that sucker off. And it's not even under contract by anybody, but so what they mean is just go find someone who just give them something for it. Let's just get somebody who'll give them a couple of bucks to be able to buy that. And I mean, if as long as I get close to what I need, good enough. The heck with it. I'll move on. Um, so will see that kind of come out once in a while within real estate wholesaling too, but it's obviously pretty different scenarios. Um, Foreclosures and online offers are getting to be really complicated, and also very controlling in what the buyer is allowed to use or utilize for a real estate contract. And so that the amount of liability transferring to buyers into foreclosures is increasing. And Iowa has a couple of great systems, and one of them is our title system is just truly awesome. And that's because we actually have real title work done. It's not just an insurance policy. It's actual work to prove that that seller has marketable title and that buyer then can be purchasing a property with marketable title. And it's becoming increasingly more common to see that liability being put on the buyer for a seller's property. And it's becoming increasingly more common for those buyers to essentially be putting offers in through their real estate agents with no real signed contract involved. So, like, what is that buyer doing, right? Like, what are they signing? And the answer is a seller-provided contract. And those seller-provided contracts are weighted to protect the seller, not that buyer. So you need to be very careful about what those look like and what those terms look like. A lot of times they're boilerplate, a lot of times they're not. So, I mean, there are some very simple terms that could be, really churn up really horribly on those. So it's important to make sure that you're super super careful looking at foreclosures as we kind of go forward, even more so than before. And sometimes those repos in those foreclosures, it wouldn't have been unusual to even see someone try to wholesale one later on. And so maybe that was a foreclosure or a tax sale or a sheriff sale that somebody ended up buying at a really low price. And rather than just wholesaling that contract out and just getting that as contract assigned prior to closing, you'll even see investors who pick those properties up, do a light renovation, turn them into a kind of a mid to low rental, or you'll see people put a small amount of work into them to turn those into a flip house to try to make money on the flip. And I mean, these things will come up. You'll see this again and again and again. And that atmosphere of that, how can I make a buck on the short end of this? Of do I need to own it? How long do I need to own it? How much of it do I need to own? Can I just own the contract on it? And resell that. Now, the reason I'm talking about foreclosures and wholesaling is because that essentially is what asset management is, right?
Mm-hmm.
That foreclosure company is basically a wholesaler, right? Sure, they're managing that transaction. They're taking care of that property. Sometimes it's in their name, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes they're a third party twice removed from the ownership of the property that is barely managing it, and maybe they're probably an authorized signer or authorized conveyor to be able to actually liquidate those properties, but those companies are basically the wholesaler. They're essentially saying, hey, we're going to take all of your assets, Mr. John Q. Public Bank, and we're going to take those assets that are in jeopardy, and rather than just selling them off super cheap, we're going to try to push value on them as hard as we can, and try to elevate that so you can kind of get as much return as you can on that. However, we're also going to take a substantial fee when that happens, and so they essentially turn into that wholesaling party to help reconvey that. So it is kind of fascinating. There's a little bit of overlap, and just a guy on the street with a pocket full of cash who wants to try to make some more cash with it, on picking up something under contract and wholesaling it, and it's also interesting to see somebody else take that to essentially a larger level of doing asset management for foreclosures, because it's not. So a lot of they walk a lot of the same line. They're not exactly the same, I'm sure, but um, just saying. And all of this is my perspective. All of this is my personal professional opinion on these things. Um, I do think, though, it's one of the most important pieces, though, is the devil is in the details, especially with a wholesaler, especially with repos, um, especially with any third party managed asset like that. You always want to make sure that that contract reflects what you're willing to do. You don't want to get into that Peter Griffin scenario where, it just says on the contract, I can't believe he's signing it. I can't believe he's signing it. And, you, you truly need to know what you're doing. So don't be afraid to grab a professional.
There you go. How's the market?
I'm digging it. It's true. Honestly, it's slowed down a little bit, and but that's in sales, not in labor. Labor for me is really about the same. Last week was one of the busiest weeks I've had all year, and I know the next 3 weeks are still stacked full of closings for us. Um, Inventory is really at the the best side of minimum good that I've seen in a long time. People can make choices. They can look. They can take a little bit more time. If you're looking at a house and you're like, I like that. Let me think on that. And so versus, I like that. I'm like, all right, you have cash. How are you going to buy that? How fast can you buy that? What's that going to look like? We need to make an offer today or it's going to be sold. Those scenarios are ended. And so I like seeing this buyer and seller having some equality. I like seeing, not so much. Everybody likes to see their values go up, but I also like seeing the market adjust itself to kind of bring that equality between that buyer and seller. And it does make transactions more complicated. It does make transactions have a bit more labor to them. But they need it, right? Like those, I mean, these are these moments where these transactions require a lot of hard work to make sure that everyone's protected and everyone's safe and their financial choices are sound and the financial assets are sound and their physical property is something that reflects a good decision. Yeah, yeah, I like that. I just like that. I think that's great. And I think if it means that agents got to work a little harder, good. Get to work. You know? Um, Maybe that's just the Gen Xer in me. But
Isn't there sort of, though, right now a Doppler effect in reverse? Because, interest rates have gone up. But the people who are closing on houses right now got their mortgages 2 months ago, right? Because there's that lag time now that we
yeah,
have.
yeah, like 2 months to a month and a half ago.
So do you think 2 months from now we're going to see a precipitous drop because of the interest rate hike?
I don't think we'll see it from the interest rate hike. I think we'll see it because of weather, just like we do every year.
Yeah. Okay. I just didn't.
I mean, that period in between Halloween and Thanksgiving is usually the most volatile time of the year, negatively, right? And so we're used to seeing all this positive, like, oh my gosh, everything's going up, up, up. And I've had nothing but apprehension as that happens because that scares me. I'm like, whoa, it's just like, just like the storm surge in Fort Myers, right? I mean, just because the water's not, way out. I mean, it's going to come up, 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 and it can be kind of scary when that happens. And this is that same sort of thing. If our market climbs up, up, up real rapidly, and for any duration of time, I have to worry about what that pendulum effect is. How far is it going to come back down? So, I actually liked having some of these real seasonal pieces of kind of market slowdowns, and I think that that's what we're in for to see. I don't necessarily think that we're gonna see a huge difference in the volume of properties being purchased because of interest rates. I think what we're gonna see is the price tag on those properties be different, not so much as like property values are going to be plummeting because of that. I think it's actually going to be a little bit different. I think it's going to be our highest market conforming house is going to take an adjustment as to what that is. So otherwise, if the ultimate purchase price is, let's say, 250,000, then if we start to see interest rates climb, then we're going to see that purchase price come down more and more. So I mean that could be 150 to 175. And so it could be a big difference because what that monthly payment turns into for that consumer is what actually dictates that purchase price, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's easier to change the value of a home than it is our wages sometimes. So,
Yeah.
and the value of that property is not just tied up in just the market conditions of what it's like to purchase it, but it's also within the financial instrument you use to purchase, which is, of course, a loan, interest rate.
And that'll be it for this edition of Right at Home with Matt Carzalotti.
You can't unhear it.
We'll do it again next week, same bat time, same bat station. Now you know everything you ever wanted to know about wholesaling.
No, that's as much as I want to know. Yeah. I like this song better.